Hey, welcome back to another episode of A Warrior Spirit where the inner warrior shines in their light. Today I have part three of Talia Howard's story. Last week when we spoke with Talia, she was talking about her philosophy and how her light comes from her darkness. And today we're going to just explore that a little bit deeper and how she guided herself with the help of loved ones and others through her journey. So Talia, thank you for coming back to finish up your arc. And I appreciate your time tonight.
Yeah, thank you so much, Daryl, again for having me. I'm extremely grateful and just honored to share my experience and my journey. Hasn't been an easy one, but nonetheless, I'm very honored and grateful to be here today. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate that. And last week when we were talking, you were, kind of exploring your philosophy and your understanding and how you've transformed your life, from that really dark spot into being the more softer, gentler person you are today. But there was a process in there, and some of it wasn't as easy as it sounded last week. You wanted to kind of expand upon that a little bit. So we've heard your child story, we've heard your finishing arc story. Today we're going to talk a little bit about that middle story when you were married and your progress through that. So take us to that point in your life.
Yeah, so I was married for 11 years, together for 13, and recently got divorced last year. And I've not really shared a lot about that with too many people. Um, to be honest, I've kind of just been protecting my peace. But now I'm ready to share and in hopes that my message can maybe help someone, whether they have gone through something similar or, can relate. That's definitely my goal today. But yeah, so I was married and I met my ex-husband um online. That's kind of the thing nowadays. And we originally met, when I was 18, very young. And we met here in Arizona. We talked for a couple months and then I moved. I was kind of a wild gypsy back then and was moving all over the place. I moved, we lost reconnection, or we lost connection, and then we reconnected probably like 10 years later. He was in Iraq at the time. And I was here in Arizona. And so we reconnected social media and started talking, connected. I feel like at that point in my life, I was kind of done with all the dating. I was like, I want to get married, I want to have kids, which I never wanted before. But it's interesting how, as you get older, your perspective changes, priorities change, and things change. And so I was pretty set on like, okay, the next person that I pick, I want to get married. Like that's my goal. And so that that's who I chose. We started dating and everything happened really fast.
Did
You
it feel
know,
like you were like old friends because you had met 10 years prior and you just kind of picked up with those same?
yeah, there was definitely some familiarity there. And me back then, I was very outgoing, extrovert, and he was kind of the opposite. And so that kind of attracted me, the stable, steady type personality. And so that was definitely one of the things that attracted me to him back then. And so that definitely was a factor to take in. And I everything happened so quickly. He came down to Arizona for his R&R, moved me down to Colorado where he was at. I lived in his home. Um, he went back to Iraq for a few more months, and I stayed in Colorado by myself. And so in the beginning, it was you don't know each other really when you
Yeah.
first meet someone. And so to move that quickly, there was a lot of things that we started um, experiencing and finding out about each other. And I had already made the commitment of moving to another state to be with this man. And so I was pretty committed at that point in trying to, make things work. And there was definitely a lot of volatility right from the start. And
So was the, I don't mean to
no,
cut you off too
absolutely.
much, but was there was there any signs of the volatility prior to you moving to Colorado and you just kind of yellow flagged them instead of red flagged them, or did it only happen once you were already moved?
It was once I already moved. We everything we did before then was very superficial. Never really got deep into topics or anything like that. It was, oh, I love you, you love me, oh, you're so handsome, and just very superficial things. And so it didn't really show until after I moved in, and he was already back in Iraq. And it was just a difference in personalities, how we see things, how we do things. Like I said, I was very outgoing. I talked to people all the time, and he wasn't like that at all. And so that was a huge clash of understanding each other. And so that went on, and honestly, I kind of fell into a little bit of a depression at that time because I was by myself, and he was in Iraq. And I kind of isolated myself. And so that kind of started, I think, the breakdown of me. And eventually he did come back to the States, and we were able to be together. Um, and
But if you're isolating, like if you're an outgoing person who, chats with everybody, and you suddenly start just withdrawing and internalizing that, now even the person that he moved to Colorado isn't the same person that he's coming back to from Iraq because you've changed your behavior and who you were. So the mix, which was already volatile, now you have probably, and I'm guessing, resentment, your own anger, your own issues, trying to get yourself out of your own depression, all of that. So it sounds like it was a cocktail from both of you that wasn't going to stabilize. How long before he came back from Iraq till you actually decided to marry him? And if there was already these yellow and red flags, why go through with it?
yeah, that's a great question. We dated for a year. We were engaged for a year, and then we got married. So, that part, what I don't think was necessarily rushed. And the flags were there. There was, and I have the utmost respect for veterans and for people who serve in the military. I know it's extremely difficult. And I do want to say, you know, before I share these things, that um in no way, shape, or form am I trying to bash the father of my children. Um, he's a good man. However, these are things that did occur, and this is part of my story. And I always say with anyone, I have my reality, he has his reality, and then somewhere in the middle is the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Because we all see things from our filters, from our perspectives, and things of that nature. And so, he struggled when he got back from Iraq, and there was some major anger and rage issues, major ones. And at that time, I I just was not equipped to know how to handle it. And it was a lot of, these anger and rage, and then I'm sorry, and begging for forgiveness and feeling so bad. And it was honestly just this toxic dance. And I go back, and I've asked this question in therapy, counseling, like, why did I still marry. And um I honestly don't have an answer for that because I knew, and I'm sure he probably, I'm not perfect. I'm sure there were some, I know that there were some things that I probably could have done differently as well. Um, but the reality is I take accountability. I chose to marry. I chose knowing um what was happening. Um and I still did it. And so that is actually a process that I had to go through myself, of forgiving myself for still putting myself through that, even though I should have known. And, looking back, I got two beautiful boys out of it, and I wouldn't change that for the world. I mean, I look at it now as I went through that to get my two boys, and that's worth it for me.
So, how old was he when he came back from Iraq?
Oh, um, I would say probably 31.
Okay, so a little older.
Yeah.
My former stepson was a Marine, and he was over in Iraq for a great period of time. And I know that when he came back, he was totally like what you're describing from your husband, short-tempered, rage-filled, and what I discovered is that the military, when they bring you back from war or service, they'll give you 2 weeks of quote unquote therapy, and then you're out the door. So you spend a year plus doing all whatever you're doing over there, and then you come back and they're like, oh, 2 weeks, you're good. Doesn't quite make for a great civilian life. But on your case, was some of it, would you think, because you had isolated yourself and you had diminished who you are, and this was your kind of lifeline, justify it that, I moved out here,
Absolutely.
that's,
Absolutely. I always say that if I had been in Arizona around my friends, around my family before I left, I would have left. I would not have
mhm.
stayed in the relationship. And that was definitely a huge factor in why I stayed so long. I just became attached to him in a way that was not good.
Was it codependency?
And
Would
I
you
think there
call it?
was definitely some codependency there. I've had a history of not great relationships at all. One that was extremely physically abusive, emotionally abusive, verbally abusive, things of that nature. So, um, absolutely, there was definitely on his end and on my end
But
as well.
if you came from an environment of that, your filter is naturally saying, this is normal. This is what I always have. This is what I, so it might not have been a big a red flag as it would have been
Yeah.
otherwise, because you already conditioned yourself that this is what I get.
Yeah. And I think, that was to a certain extent. The couple of relationships I had before him were not abusive in that way. I think that, your subconscious is very powerful. And I think if I had continued to be around my friends and family, like I had built myself up to a certain period, but the fact that I was able to go backwards in that sense, like there was still that in my subconscious that I didn't really realize then. So I think it's definitely a matter of kind of both at the same time.
So off camera, you kind of told me a little backstory, and I don't want to bring it to the front story if you don't want to, but I do want to kind of skirt towards it if you're wanting to talk about it.
Sure.
At some point in this toxic dance, you went for some self-care, and that led to some not great things. Was that at the beginning of that, at the middle of that? Do you even want to talk about that? I'll keep it vague until you tell me otherwise, but
Yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah. And I'll be completely honest and vulnerable. I'm scared to share this. Right now my heart is completely open, And I know, when it's open, you open it to all different things, love, understanding, forgiveness, judgment, criticism, things of that nature. And so I know that I'll get a mixture of all of that. But I am ready to talk about that. Um, I've spent the last year, just doing a lot of hard inner work. And I am ready to give this away. It's not mine anymore. What happened in the marriage, doesn't belong to me anymore. It's not a part of me anymore. But yes,
And I'll
in
pause you for just a
2021,
second, though. I'm going to stop you real quick because I think it's important that the audience understand I'm not doing this to divulge stuff that you said off camera, and I'm
yeah,
not doing this to pry in an area that you don't want to go to. I'm doing this because I think it's important that both sides are shown that they had their issues, not just
one
one
side.
side versus the other. And a toxic dance is two people dancing, not just one person, doing it. So that's the only reason I'm approaching it. Also, because you said you're ready to give it away. So I just think that's an
Absolutely. No,
important distinction.
yeah, and I appreciate that because I definitely feel like a lot of the stories and a lot of the narrative that has been happening has been one-sided, and I've not really shared my side. And I think, that's important. And like I said, at this point in my journey and in my healing, I'm ready to share that. And so yeah, we were together for um in 2021 is when kind of an event happened, and um kind of backpedal a little bit from there. We were in this relationship, in this marriage. I had my boys pretty quickly. Um and one of the main things that we struggled with in our marriage was that my ex-husband had a porn addiction. And um I know that's not something that people like to talk about. Um, a lot of people struggle with this, and it's kind of a taboo subject, along with what I did is a very taboo subject as well. But I think it's very important to shed light on it because it's very, very destructive to relationships and to marriages. And so that was something that I dealt with for many years. In our relationship.
And an addiction is, it doesn't matter if it's gambling, it doesn't matter if it's drinking, it doesn't matter if it's porn. An addiction of any kind is going to tear at the fabric of a relationship. So relationships are hard enough as they are. You throw an addiction in there, it takes, a lot out of the relationship. So
Yeah, it does. And we tried the therapy, and that didn't work. We met with a couple of them, and then I got to a point where I stopped caring, stopped searching, stopped looking, and I just said I'm going to focus on raising my two little boys and just doing the best that I can in regards to continuing to build my family.
you were resigned to just living this life of uncomfort and volatility.
Yeah, I always say, the pain, and this is the main reason I stayed as long as I did in the marriage, is that the pain of not being with my two boys every day far exceeded the pain of being in my marriage. And so I stayed. Um, and I made the best I could out of it. Um, but that went on for years. Um, the anger, the rage, the verbal abuse,
Do you
that went
think
on for years.
do you think those, and I'm trying to give you a little pause there so you can, you
So
know, do what you need to. But do you think the rage and the verbal abuse and all that, do you think it intensified because of the addiction, or that was just a sad byproduct?
I think it was definitely a part of it, you know. I think I don't really know because it was something that was never really talked about or we ever got really deep on. You know, there were times where I was blamed for it and it just got to a point where um you know, I just didn't even want to think about it. And but I'm sure it tied into it. I don't know. I honestly can't speak on behalf of, you know, what was going on with the between those two. Um, but it was a lot. And um
So how old were you at this point where you're just resigned to the fact that I'm just going to be the best mother I can be and tolerate the rest? How old
my
were you?
boys were probably about 2 or 3. So they're 10 now. So it was, yeah, I was probably 30, 34, 35, 34, 33, somewhere
Yeah.
around there.
And if you were already in a depressive state when you were reaching to that point, that just had to
Yeah.
compound that
Yeah.
depression.
Yeah, I mean, you know, and I'm a very strong person. I'm a very strong person. And so, you know, it certainly broke me down to a certain point. But then, I mean, I remember I would hire coaches just for one day, just so I could talk to someone because I never shared with my family. I never shared with anyone anything of what was really going on in my marriage. And, you know, part of that was I was protecting my family, you know. It was still my husband and you know, you always have this image that you want to portray to people of your family. And so um I remember I'd hire coaches just to talk to them for one day and just share with them everything that was happening. And then I'd never see them again, but it would help me continue and get through. Um, and, you know, I got to a point where, you know, I tried to leave a couple of times as well, but it was, and I won't really get into that, but there was a lot of control, um, a lot of controlling. Um, Everyone knows my boys are my weak spot. And so, I continued to stay.
And were you still in Colorado at this point, or had you moved back?
No, I had moved back to Arizona by then. Um, and even my family, I didn't tell my family anything. I had my sister every once in a while, she would know a little bit about, you know, what I was going through, but I never really shared the extent of, unless things got really, really, really bad, then I would call someone to like help. Um,
And is your
but for
sister, because I know your sister plays a factor in your story, is she your older sister, your younger sister?
She's my oldest sister. Yeah,
Older
she's
sister.
she's one of the ones that I would confide in about certain things. Um, and so, you know, this continued. And you know, we had times that were good. I'm not gonna sit here and say like it was all just horrible. We had some good times. And when it was good, it was good. And then when it was bad, it was bad. And I knew it wasn't healthy, you know, and I tried to protect my boys as much as I could from seeing, you know, the anger outburst and things of that nature. I did my best. Um and then in 2021, um the end of 2021, I was going to leave. I had made the decision. I'm leaving. I cannot take this anymore. And I had told my mom I was going to leave. I had voiced to my ex-sister-in-law as well some of the things I was going through and that I was planning on probably leaving, and I was going to wait until after the holidays. And um at that time, my little sister Tanya, she had cancer and she was battling cancer. And after the holidays in January, I actually ended up finding out I was pregnant. And that kind of changed everything. I was like, oh my God, like, I guess God, this is God's way of telling me that I can't leave. I have to stay. And so I kind of was like, oh, okay, I'm gonna see, see how this goes. And then in February, my little sister died of cancer. And 4 days later, I lost the baby.
So sorry.
And that was a very difficult week. Um, but I was able to get through it. And I was obviously very broken. Um, and so a couple weeks later, I was just so stressed. And I booked a massage to help me decompress, help me just, relax and stuff. And so I booked a massage, and I went in. The massage therapist asked me, what brings you in? And I said, I just lost my little sister, lost a baby, and just feeling very stressed. And so did a massage on me. It was great. And he was like, this one's on me. Just promise you come back. He's like, I've lost someone before and I know how difficult it is. So just promise me you'll come back, and we'll make sure that you get taken care of. And it's very appreciative. I said, thank you so much. And I did that. And then I went back and I got a couple of more massages. And then um, the fourth one changed. It started to be a little bit more intimate. And I didn't say anything, but I definitely noticed. And it eventually turned into an affair. It was an emotional affair, somewhat of a physical affair. And eventually it lasted a few months, and my ex-husband found out. And obviously very broken that I did that. And I wanted to leave and I wanted to stay. It's very difficult. But
Can you
he
explain that for just a second? We understand wanting to leave. That's clear. Explain the wanting to stay part.
for 3 years, almost 4 years, every day, I would ask myself the question, should I stay or should I go? And that is one of the most tormenting questions you can ask yourself. And I say that because there was nothing more that I wanted than to keep my family together. And so I just always had this idea or this dream that, things would work out. And I never wanted my boys to grow up in a broken home, but they were already growing up in a broken home.
So internally, your battle is trying to save your family, more for your children and the idea of family versus saving yourself by leaving. That's the internal battle you're having at that point.
Absolutely. It's hard. People always say, and just leave, like, just leave. It's that easy. And I, it's funny, I used to say that too, like, just leave, like, don't don't have an affair, don't do this, don't do that, just leave. But when you spent your life with someone for 13 years and you built a home, you built a life, you're building wealth together, you have this family, and um that's hard to break away from that.
And it's also got to be hard because you are somewhat of a public figure because of your job. You're in real estate, you guys were flipping homes, you were building stuff. So your public image is one of, joy and happiness and everything's good. So you're living like not only a dual life, but a triple life. One that you're living in private for you, one you're living within your family for its reality, and the third that you're living on in the public eye to just keep up appearances. So those are three very different ways to live, and all of them come with hardships. So now I understand your dilemma. Do I stay? Do I go? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a tormenting feeling to have. Um, it's I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. And he wanted me to stay, and he was willing to do therapy and counseling because I had been pushing to do it for years, and he refused. I said, even like, just go by yourself, like, we don't even need to do it together, just go. And he finally agreed to do counseling and stuff. And um he forgave me and wanted to continue the marriage. And so I said, okay. And you know, we continued, and we did get some counseling. He hired a couple of marriage counselors and therapists in regards to people who focus on infidelity and rebuilding in that sense. Um and things were great for a few months. Um and then um the marriage counselor that we were with, he ended up getting into a verbal fight with them online, where it was just a yelling match. And he fired her. um we've talked with four different counselors in our lives, and two of them told me I should probably leave the marriage, because he either walked out on them or fired them, things of that nature.
So
And
and I'm just going to pause you for just a brief minute. Just my, as a coach, my, I was just having this conversation with my wife. My pet peeve about coaching is when people don't want to do the work, yet they want to waste my time asking them to help them do the work. So I can picture your husband being asked to do work he doesn't want to be doing, which led to, the explosive anger, which led to the, I'm out of here, I'm not going to do it. Like, if you're not willing to do the actual work, it's like going to a gym and, just walking around and looking at the weights. I mean, yeah, you're at the gym, but you're not using the gym. So some part of him is only doing this because you asked, and it saves face. Oh, I'm going to counseling. But if you're in there not doing the work, it's kind of tough. As a coach, it is hard when you have to tell a client this isn't working out. And so for two of them to come to you and say, there's no hope here, that's not an easy thing to say to a client. So that that says a lot about what the environment was without even saying what the environment was.
Yeah, and I mean the narrative is was always that I manipulated the coaches. I was
Hmm.
manipulative. I twist words. I get them to just be on my side, and that's just how the whole marriage was it was always just like a competition of that. Like I feel like I kept myself like I had to keep myself small to a certain extent because anything that became too much of what I did, whether it was real estate, whether it was crocheting, whether anything that's more important than him. And so like I it was like walking on eggshells constantly. And that was just like the narrative always was I manipulate everyone. And you know, I I look back on, so much of it and I didn't really realize the extent of what I went through until I was gone from the marriage. And then I look back and I'm just like, wow. um
Well, I've known you for a little while, and not to make light of your situation, but you're not that powerful. Like you're not you're not good enough to be manipulating everybody around you, especially people you're hiring to help you. So, you know, I'm sorry
I'm
that
not
that was put on you, but yeah, you're not that good.
I will take that. I'm not at all. And so yeah, and so we did the counseling and that didn't end well. And then I was told to like not have contact with her anymore, the coach, and that I sided with her over him because I was upset, in regards to like how it ended and things of that nature. For me, I've always valued emotional intelligence. And so that was, a thing that was just severely lacking in the relationship. And so we continued. I continued. And, things eventually just went back to the way they always were. And I knew I was going to leave. I just didn't know how. I didn't know when. I had become a person. I had allowed myself, I take full 100% accountability for everything that I did. The affair, I chose to marry him. I chose for him to be the father of my children, and I chose to stay as long as I did. And with that, I had turned into someone that I never want to be again and someone I will never be again. And that's one thing I ask myself now is like, who am I when I'm with this person? For me, that speaks of volumes of what type of person they are and if they are the right fit for me. If they are bringing out the worst in me and they're bringing out, things that I like, that's my responsibility to get myself out of that environment, to get myself away from those people or that energy or whatever the case is. And so, I take full accountability, responsibility for everything that I did. Um, and because of that, I also had to take the accountability to get myself out. I don't know how, like I said, then I didn't know how, I didn't know when, but I knew like this is just not going to work long term.
So once you made the decision, um, did you, my brother, when his wife decided to leave him, he came home to an entirely empty house. No furniture, no food, no dishes, nothing, just an empty house. Like she never even acknowledged it. When my divorce happened, my ex-wife came to me and told me, we're done. Now, in my case, she was the one who was not so pleasant and not doing things so good. But there's two ways of leaving. Which way did you do?
Mine was much more subtle. It was actually him that filed for divorce, not me. Um, so what ended up happening was, towards the end, full transparency, I had no respect for him. And that was a promise. It's interesting now I look back and, for me looking at things now, it's like, for me, love is great. Love doesn't mean anything. If I love you, but I don't respect you, it's not it. I can love you, but if I don't trust you, it's not it. I will make my decisions differently based on whether I respect you or not whether I love you or not. And I had come to a point in this relationship where I had zero respect for him. I had respect for him in the sense of, he's the father of my children and things of that nature, but in terms of like that's not right on my end. Like that was wrong of me to feel that way and be that way. But I also understand where I was at. Like I give myself grace now looking back. And I'm not going to be all hard on myself and like I've carried shame and guilt for so long. I don't do it anymore. Like I understand now where I was coming from. And so towards the end, I got to a point where I didn't respect him and I was not I was lying about things. I was hiding things and I was at a point where I didn't care. And a couple of scenarios happened between us. Um and I think that got the ball rolling and kind of how it all happened is he wasn't working. He didn't work for almost for about a year. He was working with his nonprofit, but that wasn't like bringing in any money. And so that's a whole nother story. But I ended up getting him helping him get a job with a colleague of mine, a very well-respected businessman. And I had introduced them and he ended up working with him. And while he was working there, he started talking with another woman at the office there. And I knew something was off. And at that point he was vocalizing he wanted a divorce. And never had he been that like, I want the divorce, because it's never happened. And so I said, okay. And after just kind of doing a little bit more digging, he was talking with another woman, giving her all kinds of details about our divorce, the where we're at, the kids, and then he was also on some sites telling other girls that he was already divorced and he has his children 50-50, all these things. And so um I was hurt. I'm not gonna lie. It's the human mind is so complex and our emotion and it's so complex. And it was like a part of me was like, okay, this is my chance. Let's go. And then, another part of you just like wants to hold on. And it's just like, oh, it's so difficult sometimes. But I brought it up to him about it and he denied anything was there. And I said, I saw text messages, like, you can't lie to me, like I saw it. And so I said, okay, well, we'll get a divorce. We'll sign the papers. And we signed him. He filed them. And then I don't know what happened with that whole thing, but I believe it ended or something. And then he changed his mind and he wanted to come back. He wanted to reconnect. And I said no. And before that, everything was amicable. Like we signed our divorce papers, no courts, no judges. We we agreed. And then once he changed his mind and he got upset that I would not go back, everything changed. It went from amicable to non-amicable at all. And and it's interesting because and I could go back to every coach, every therapist that I've been with in the last 13 years I was married, and I always said, I also don't want to leave because I was afraid of what kind of co-parent he would be. And there's a lot that has been happening, behind closed doors in the last year of um parenting our boys together. And that has been a journey in of itself. Now, I will say it could be worse. So I'm going to be thankful for that. I've heard of other co-parent situations that are way worse. But it could be better. And I hope and pray one day that it can be better and we can be cordial and friends for the sake of our boys. I mean, I'm just a huge advocate of put everything aside. Our boys don't care what you did. Our boys don't care what I did in the marriage. What they're going to care about is how we treat each other today, how we respect each other today, how we talk about each other today. That's what our boys are going to care about. And it's been a journey, and it's an ongoing journey. Um, but I definitely feel at this point in my life the worst is over. I will say that when I left, because we were still in the home going through the divorce, and we were still living together. And I eventually left and moved out because there was some very volatile arguments happening in front of our boys that I would try to run away from. And I had to call my mom and to help navigate this. And so I ended up removing myself from the home so my boys don't see that. And
Did you
I
sit down with
remember
them? Did you sit down with them and explain what's going on as far as leaving the house and, that you and your ex-husband are not going to be living together anymore? Did you
we
help?
we both yeah, we both sat down and told him that we were going to be getting a divorce, but I've never told them what was happening. Like
Mhm.
I will never say a bad word about their father to them ever. And so I just basically said mama's going to leave, baby. And at that point we had agreed to split, so they were coming with me 50% of the time and then staying at the house with him. And but they saw it. One time they did see it, and I told them mama's leaving because this is not the way we should be talking to each other, and mom doesn't want you guys to see this. And I took off. Um, Actually, I had them with me. And in the car, and I was crying and everything, and I told them we're gonna go because this is not something that you boys should be seeing. And then that was when I actually left the home. And I remember it was the second day of being outside the home, and it was just this overwhelming relief of for the first time in 13 years, my nervous system felt safe. It was an unbelievable feeling to just lay there and be like, wow, I don't have to go through all of that anymore. And some people try to get me to go back.
They try to
And I
get you to
said,
go back to your husband?
yeah, because at that point, nobody really knew. And I stood my ground. And, towards the end of our marriage, I started recording I started recording, and I shared, those recordings with a couple of people. And once they heard that, they supported me. People who are very close to me, and they said, "Okay, like, we get it. Don't go back." And that meant a lot to me because, um, you know, sometimes you feel like you're crazy and like, is this real? Like, is what I'm feeling legit? Is this, and so like, and that was one of the things, my biggest mistakes I had was I was even towards the end, like I didn't have a support system. Like I was isolated and had people pushing me to go back. And I had to stand my ground and I had to speak up and tell them like what I was going through and what I had been through. And like this was affecting me as a mother, it was affecting my business, it was affecting me as a person. It was affecting every aspect of my life and like I needed to do it.
So how long were you out of the house? I know you said it wasn't too long before you felt that instant relief, but trauma still takes a little while to get through. How long till you started to actually heal? Was it prior to Peru? Was it in Peru? Was it like before then? All of it?
Yeah, and it was definitely prior to Peru. I mean, after I left, I started reaching out to some of the people in my life that kind of knew a little bit. I had some really close girlfriends in real estate that were coaches, and I had confided to them years ago about some of the things I was going through, but it was always just little snippets of information. And so I started reaching out to them, and they were just unbelievable. And just, at that time, I carried so much shame and so much guilt because, the narrative was Talia and Chris are divorced because Talia had an affair. And that's it. And that was hard to hear and not say anything. But that's what I did. I just kind of stayed quiet. People didn't see the 9 years before. Um, And not to say that that's an excuse for what I did, because as I said, I take 100% accountability for what I did. But at the same time, those things did happen. And those were also part of the story. And those were also factors of why we were at where we're at. It wasn't all on my shoulders. And so, coming out of it, I just carried so much shame and guilt and um, for it all. Um, and, with the help of just really dear friends and my dear friend, Steph Levine, she got me connected actually with some coaches, um, Kai Jordan and Gabriella. They're from Devotional Love, and they are relationship coaches. They teach about conscious relationships and love. And, at that point in my life, I knew like anyone who knows me, I'm all about family. Like I'm all about the traditional husband, wife, children, um, there's nothing more that I want than that. And so I knew like I want to eventually, I know marriage can be beautiful. I know a relationship can be beautiful. Like I've seen it, I've witnessed it. And so I wanted that for myself. But I had to take a look at myself and realize I chose to marry who I married. I chose to be in the relationship that long. I made all these bad decisions. And I was at a point where I didn't trust myself. Like, and now I have two little boys to think about. Like, I'm not dating. I don't want to date. I don't want anything because I don't even know if I'm going to be picking the right person. And I'm not going to relive a relationship that was similar to this again. And so like I had zero trust in myself at all. My philosophy is you attract who you are. It's like you don't focus on attracting the right person. You become, or you don't look for the right person, you become the right person and then you attract them. And so I know the first step I needed to do was work on myself and figure out, why did I allow myself to go through that? Why did I allow myself to have an affair? Why did I allow myself to do all those things? And so I met with Kai and Gabriella, and I was just blown away by them. Like I didn't even have to hear them speak, just their energy and how their relationship was with each other just absolutely blew my mind. And so I met with them, and I hired them, and I have to say is probably I've spent thousands of dollars of my life investing in personal development, thousands, between Tony Robbins and all that stuff. And I would say the investment I made with them was probably one of the best investments I've ever made. Um, they worked with me every week, every week for about it's been about 7 months. I'm still working with them, and I have been able to just release everything that I've been carrying. And it's interesting, there's so much that is beyond words. A lot of the work we've done has been work in the body, energy that has been trapped, trauma that's been trapped, um and things of that nature. And so I've just been honored to work with them, and they've honestly just changed my life and helped me forgive myself, and help me understand that what I did doesn't define me,
Well, we spoke
and
about
to have
this
grace.
exactly. We spoke about this last week when we spoke. Grace and forgiveness of yourself is key to any of the healing, and all of our trauma is stored in our DNA. And I mentioned to you last week, you are softer today, visibly softer today than when I first met you years ago when you were in the midst of all that stuff. And being able to forgive those around you is good, but to forgive yourself is vital. And that's when you're going to really heal. And that's what you've done. You've released and you're forgiving. And it's not only grace for your ex-husband and the people around you, but grace for you. Like
Mm.
that's the huge, that's where the victory is when you stand on the other side of that, and you can look in the mirror and you can say, I forgive you. I understand. I forgive you, and you're getting there. I see it, it's, you're doing the hard work. And the thing about the work is that as you uncover one layer, it allows room for that other layer to come up so you can then work on that. You know, there's some deep-seated stuff within all of us.
Yep.
And some coaches will go in, be like dynamite and try to blow it all up. And the smart ones will be like an excavator and go in and just one layer at a time, you know, keep letting it work. But very proud of you for doing the work that you're doing. And I said it to you last week as well. It's vital for your boys because what you don't think that they're seeing, they're seeing. And what you don't think that they're feeling, they're feeling. And, from what I've seen of your children, they are very intuitive, very gifted, very empathic, very loving boys, but they also see both sides, and you're giving them the example of forgiveness of self, not blame. You're becoming the victor in your story, not the continued victim.
Absolutely. And my boys are so smart. um Whatever they need to figure out, and whatever they need to figure out and see as they get older, they will on their own.
Hmm.
And that was one of the biggest things that would just eat me away is, before was, what are my boys going to think of me one day? um and I'm sure one day they might watch this one day when they get older. And I have come to the realization that they will forgive me and they will love me. Um, I know if there's one thing that no one can take away from me is that I'm an amazing mother.
Which is
And I know,
ironic for a woman who didn't want to be a mother.
I know.
But I'll tell you that your boys not only will love you, they will love what you did for you. Because when we try to portray ourselves as non-flawed, perfect parents and entities, that's a recipe for parental disaster. But when they can see our vulnerability and see our flaws, they don't need to know the ugly details, but they need to know that we are owning up to what we did. We're taking personal responsibility. And that teaches them that it's okay to be flawed because you can be loved even flawed. You know, um, sometimes people talk about, broken glass, and that's what a mosaic is. It's a beautiful broken piece of glass that has been put back together with the love and grace of someone who cared for it. And you are creating your own mosaic within yourself. So,
I love that. Yeah. And it's interesting. We were on our road trip a couple weeks ago, and my my youngest said to me, he's like, "Mama, I love like how happy you are all the time." And that meant a lot because that wasn't, always the case. And we think we're doing things for our children in regards to what we think is best for them. Um, which is why I stayed so long. And, everything happens in its own timing. And it was time, they were getting older, they were starting to see things, they were starting to pick up on things. I couldn't hide them anymore. They were little, they weren't little anymore. And
right.
so it was time because all the way I see it is all it's going to do, and this was something my therapist taught me before I left, and when I was going through everything and talking with my therapist about, the affair and everything that had happened. And, she told me, like, if you don't do something, your boys will model what you have before them. If you continue this, they're going to repeat the same cycle in their marriages and in their relationships. They have to see a contrast. They have to see what's healthy and what's not healthy. And if you continue, that's gonna be their model for their relationships moving forward. And so, like, this wasn't just a decision, for me. It was like, this is also dependent on, how my boys are going to treat their women, and how my boys are going to be in their marriages, and the kind of man that they're going to be. And so, it all matters. It all works together.
Yeah. People say it all the time. Oh, I'm going to stay together for the kids. When in the reality of life, it's exactly like you said. Being together in unhappy, unhealthy is not as beneficial for our children as being whole and happy with ourselves. Some broken families can come back together and both be healthy, and others are better just being co-parents, you know?
And I mean, I look back, I come from a divorced family as well. And when you're young, you don't quite realize it until you get older, and then you look back and you're like, it's good they got a divorce. It was volatile and screaming and fighting, and very unsafe as a child to constantly hear that and be around that. And it's like you don't understand it when you're young, but once you get older, you start realizing that I'm glad my mom and dad got a divorce. Like, I'm
Hmm.
glad, because it was volatile and it was not healthy.
Well, and the
Um,
other part of that is children tend to take on the responsibility of keeping it happy. They try to overcompensate. If I can just be this, or if I can just be that, and they they model a perfectionism within themselves, because if I can just be perfect and good and behave, my parents won't do what they're doing, not understanding that the parents are doing what they're doing with no it doesn't matter about the children. It matters what's going on between the parents. But the child takes on that responsibility oftentimes, which is not healthy for the child either. So, they do see, they do hear, they do form their own opinions. And, sometimes in a little mind, it's not always the right opinion. So being happy and healthy separate, again, is doing them better and teaching them, like, your boys will, I'm sure they already forgive you.
They do.
They do. Yeah.
They do. And that's one thing I've constantly been working on is, the language and solidifying that within myself. It's still, I mean, it's been a year, but it's still something that is fresh still for me. And and like I said, that this is definitely my way of letting it go. Um I'm giving it away. It's not mine. It's not mine anymore. It's like I'll take it for what it has taught me. And because I have learned some unbelievable, valuable lessons in the last 13 years. And I know that these lessons will serve me in an amazing way in the future in regards to who I am today, and the relationship that I have, moving forward. Um it just has given me such a keen self-awareness and observation of other people. And I'm unbelievably proud of who I am today. And I
Well,
can sit here and
you've taken those lessons and you've actually applied them to yourselves, because 13 years, your lessons, they go beyond the 13 years of the marriage. You are, through this process, releasing all that trauma from your childhood, all those things we talked about in the first time we spoke, all those abusive relationships that weren't in your marriage. You're learning how to be a better, more discerning person, and the value of yourself, instead of, oh, if I have, regardless of the relationship's good or bad, if I have somebody, I'm okay. No, you're okay with just you. And so that's, a huge lesson that you're learning way early. And I can tell you, from someone who found the love of his life later in life, I wish I'd have learned those when I was your age, because, I might have found her sooner. But
definitely.
you are laying the groundwork for yourself and your future and your children. So if somebody is listening to this and they can kind of relate to what you've been through, and the light that you are shining, because your light does come from your darkness, um, what would be your imparting words to them?
I would definitely say that, like, one of the hardest things that I've had to do is have the ability to take full accountability for the things that I have done and the things that I put myself in terms of, like, the situations and the environment, while at the same time giving myself grace and understanding. It's so easy to go completely to one end or the other end. You can drown yourself in the shame and the guilt and the regret and all of that, and you feel like this is justified. I'm a horrible person. I've done this. I've done this, and you wallow in it, and that's self-destructive. But it feels like you deserve it, and that's hard to get out of it. And then there's the other end where it's like, well, I did that because of this and this, and there's no accountability. And it's you're a victim, I did this because he did that, and it's not my fault. And so it's easy to go into one or the other extremes. But I think the key is having that balance between the two is, yes, I did that. Yes, have I had shame and guilt for a time, and then I moved past it and I'm through it, and I can have grace and forgiveness for myself. And that's when you can truly take, your mistakes that you've done in life, because everyone makes mistakes, whether it's that or something else. We all have mistakes that we've done. We've all done things that we're shameful for, that we have guilt for. And being able to pull yourself out of that and have that grace and understanding and forgiveness for yourself while still holding yourself accountable, that's hard. That's very hard. But my message to people is that, it's possible. Surround yourself with the right people to help you. I mean, I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for, the coaches and the friends that I surrounded myself with, who didn't shame me. They didn't shame me. And I had enough shaming and guilting going around me, and that's what I needed. And so just, surround yourself with people that love you and accept you. No one's perfect. And just go deep within yourself and face it. You have to face it. And that's what I did. And this is part of me facing it, is talking about it and um, openly sharing um what I've been through and what I've experienced, what I've overcome. And I'm very happy that I have. Yeah.
Well, going through it is the only way through it. So, um, again, I'm very honored that you came here and shared your journey and your story. And, if it helps release and give yourself some grace and love, I'm glad that I have a platform that allows for you to do that. So, thank you for trusting this process to this platform. And, you know, I'm grateful for you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm so grateful as well. I feel empowered, honestly. I feel empowered, and I feel like I know there's people struggling with a lot of the topics that we covered. These are some pretty taboo topics that people don't like to talk about. People don't like to talk about porn addiction. People don't like to talk about affairs. And so,
Well, they also don't like to talk about accountability.
accountability. Yeah. These are subjects that are not openly shared. And so, I was scared to share this because, like I said, and my heart's open. Whatever comes, and I'm okay with it. I know who I am. In my heart, in my soul, my spirit, my boys know who I am, and that's all that matters. And so I just encourage anyone, if you are, going through, any type of struggle or whatever, like, reach out to people. You're not alone. Like, there's so many people, you don't know what they're going through. Like, don't compare yourself to other people. You think they look perfect, they have this perfect life. Like, there's every single person, there's something going on behind closed doors that you have no idea about.
Mhm.
And so, just be kind to yourself and reach out to people. It will help.
Well, you have an open door invitation. So whenever you want to come on and philosophize or release, whichever it is, open door for you. So I'm thankful to have you in my world. And, you know, Elsa and I send you love and light always.
Love you guys.
Alrighty. Good
Thank you,
night.
Daryl. Good night.